auto sequence start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And now, on with the show.
Hi, my name is Paul Ollinger. Happiness to me is, and I should know the answer to this question since it's what I talk about and think about all the time. Happiness is self-acceptance. I just came up with it. I should put it on a t-shirt.
All right, Paul Ollinger, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. So much stuff to get into. I so many things, but I think it's safe to say that you've had a very interesting career over the
interesting.
time.
It's been interesting for sure.
You were one of the first 250 employees at Facebook. Is that right?
Very much in that range. You know, they were very purposeful about not having kind of employee numbers past a certain point, because I don't think they wanted people jockeying for position. And you know, sometimes you join and there are people that had worked there and then left, and do you count the former employees as employee numbers? I don't know, but it was a very small company when I got there, way under 300 people. And when I arrived in May 2007, Facebook was only reaching about 25 million people a month as an audience. And that sounds like a lot until you realize that today they reach something like 3 billion people. Wow. So it was a very small company, you know, and I told my wife when I joined, she was like, is this company ever going to be anything? I said, someday this company could be as big as MySpace. So that was a little joke in our family.
It didn't work out too well for MySpace.
Well, it did for a while. You know, one of the founders got to date Paris Hilton. And if that's how you're going to be compensated, then I guess you got to accept what happens to your business in the meantime.
That's right. That's right. So did you really think at that time, did you worry at all? Is this thing going to be anything, or did you? I
didn't worry. I had worked at Yahoo prior to Facebook, and I then moved from New York City to Los Angeles to do stand-up comedy full time, which I did for 2 years. And when I got engaged to my wife, we just celebrated our 17th anniversary. When we got engaged, I was like, thank you. I was like, I want to have a family, and this whole stand-up comedy thing is not necessarily the most economically predictable industry to be in. Or maybe it is predictable, and the prediction is pain, to quote Clubber Lang from, I think, Rocky III. But, you know, I wanted a job. I needed a job, and I was like, and right about that time, a friend of mine that I had worked with at Yahoo called me and said, hey, would you be interested in, joining our sales team in Los Angeles for this little company called Facebook? And I was like, what the hell, you know, let's give it a roll and see what happens. And I knew the guys, and I liked the guys that ran the sales team, and we'd worked together for a long time. I trusted them. And, you know, I'm joking about my prediction about MySpace, but nobody had an idea of how huge it was going to be. But the thing was growing so fast, and you could see like that geometric growth. And you think, well, if I join and 2 of my friends join and 2 of their friends join, that's geometric growth, and things that grow geometrically grow very, very quickly. Now, a lot of times things will grow quickly and then stop, but in the case of Facebook, it just never did. And so I was very fortunate to be around with the right skills when they had an opening.
Wow, nice. And so comedy really is not. It's always been in your blood, I guess. You were doing comedy back then, even.
I've been cursed with the passion for comedy since. The way I got into it was I went to business school because I wanted to make more money when I was 26, I guess was when I got there. And I'd always been a little bit of a ham, but I certainly had never thought about doing stand-up comedy as a career. But I wrote a kind of a smart alecky article for the student newspaper, and they said, hey, why don't you co-host the talent show we have coming up next month? And I did, and I just made fun of my friends for 10 minutes in the crowd in like a 300-person amphitheater that was packed. And I got this wave of laughter coming back at me that I had never experienced before. And I was like, oh, that's the drug that I want. And it is a drug. It is a narcotic that floods your brain with all kinds of warm fuzzies. And I was like, okay, among all these very smart people, maybe I'm the funny guy. And that's where the whole thing started.
Wow. Did you find yourself joking around at Facebook? I mean, was it an environment that you could do that, or was that kind of a,
Facebook was a pretty serious place, and it was I was 38 when I joined, and so for the first time in my career, I was on the older side of things.
Hmm.
I was a salesperson. I was not in management. They asked me a couple times. I said no because I knew I wanted to quit to go to a stand-up. But I was an individual contributor at Yahoo, and so maybe it was an age thing, and maybe it was a management thing. But I very quickly got into the administrative side of things at Facebook, and that was a little bit more serious than just being your own independent salesperson at Yahoo.
yeah.
And the generational difference was profound at Facebook. And it was the first time I was like, oh, I'm learning from the younger people as opposed to vice versa.
Hmm. What kind of feeling was that? Did you kind of,
It was fish out of water. It was very awkward. Mark Zuck was 21 when I started, 22 maybe.
wow.
And he's already a legend in Silicon Valley. For saying no, to, I don't know, I think Yahoo offered him $1 billion or $1.5 billion or something like that, which would have made him $300 or $400 million when he was 21 years old. And so anybody who says Zuckerberg was in it for the money doesn't really remember that fact.
Yeah.
Because 99.999% of 22-year-olds would say yes if you offered them $300 million for anything.
Oh yeah.
And so, but it was different. I remember this was in my first week at the company. I was visiting our offices in Palo Alto, and it was again a very small company at the time. And I sat down with one of the engineers on the photos product, and he was walking me through kind of how they launched it and the strategy of growing it. And I said after our conversation, I was like, "Can I get your business card? Because this is really, I want to stay in touch." And he was like, "Yeah, or you could just friend me, since that's sort of what we do here." And I was like, "Oh, this kid is like, this 38-year-old guy who's losing his hair is so out of touch. He's going to put
he wants a piece of paper.
He's going to put my business card on his Rolodex, which is like a big Ferris wheel looking thing on his oak desk next to his cigar ashtray or something. I don't know." So it was, it was clear that this was the new generation coming on behind us.
Did you get the feeling that they were eager to take your experience as well, though? Was it kind of a swapping of ideas, or?
I think more than generational, I think it was function that was the issue. Facebook is an engineering culture. It certainly was, and as far as I know, remains so to this day, as opposed to a business culture. And because they were focused on great product and growing the audience first, they didn't say yes to short-term revenue opportunities that would have corrupted the product. And on the advertising sales team, on the one hand, we're compensated for selling advertising, and they gave us very aggressive goals and not a ton of product to achieve those goals. And so there was tension, we'll call it lack of alignment, between sometimes what our stated goals were and what the stated goals of the company were. And the company was growing so fast that I don't think if I missed my numbers by 50% every quarter, people really would have cared, as long as we kept moving forward, hiring good people, building a strong team, because the company literally wasn't ready to monetize until well past the IPO. That was summer of 2012, if memory serves properly. And then Wall Street starts watching, and then all of a sudden, management, Zuck, says, we need a revenue strategy. It's time to get serious about ad products. And they went from having antiquated garbage ad products to some of the most innovative data-centric ad products in the history of humankind. And I don't think that's an exaggeration.
Was it in those days when you're selling a product that maybe the marketplace didn't understand at first, was that difficult in sales to try to kind of educate the client?
Yeah, educate the client is an interesting term. I had this professor in business school, Gert Asmus, Dr. Asmus, yes, he taught marketing, and we talk about what do you have to do? We have to educate the consumer, and he always go, educate the consumer. The consumer is uneducated. So that was always funny. He was a good guy. I never worked at a place where meetings were so easy to get, but closing meaningful business was so difficult. And the reason is, well, multiple. One, everybody was curious. I mean, you could get meetings with CMOs because they were like, we need to know what's going on with Facebook. If you go back to 2009 or 2008, everybody is going, okay, what is this social media thing? You know, I'd worked through the melting of the dot-com bubble in 2001. And prior to that, you had ads businesses that were built on hype, that, you know, companies would get venture capital funding. And as part of that, they would get a Yahoo ad deal that was, you know, based on eyeballs, not any kind of performance metrics. And so when the business model fell apart and there was sort of no there prior to 2001, you know, people were skeptical of advertising on the internet. After that, when the dust kind of settled from that, and then Google came along and showed advertisers and demonstrated and proved that if you spent $1, you could make $2. Well, people started to go, oh, wait a minute, this is a pretty interesting place. And yeah, you know, even from 1997 to 2004 or 5, you know, the number of people using email, looking up their stocks online, checking sports scores online, checking weather, those kinds of things, you know, skyrocketed. It probably grew by 10x or something. And so advertisers start going, well, this is a medium that we need to figure out. Okay, well, that was phase 1.5 or 1.2. And then comes along social media. And if you remember, Facebook was the first place anybody used their real name and image online. On MySpace, your name could have been Tony Rabbit from New Jersey or whatever, you know?
Right.
Or, you know, there was you'd have a pseudonym and an avatar, but you weren't your real self. Facebook, you were your real self, real consumers connecting with other real people in an authentic way online. That was revolutionary. People thought it would never happen. Yeah. And so now marketers go, okay, I know where people live. I know how old they are. I know what gender they are. I know if they have kids. I know what their interests are. This is a very, very monetizable audience. And by the way, it's growing by, you know, whatever, it's tripling in size every few months or whatever. And so they're like, we need to figure out how to monetize this. Facebook, on the other hand, was like, we're going to keep growing and we're going to worry about advertising later. So it was even after I left that they started to say, okay, you know, they had really primitive ads, just image ads that you couldn't track, and you couldn't show Amazon that if somebody saw an image of a pair of earbuds or whatever these are called, you couldn't track the exposure of that person on Facebook to the ad to a transaction. While I was there, just a few years later, you could get many layers deep on that transaction and the value of advertising. And so once Facebook started to say, okay, we're gonna get serious about ads, it turned into just a juggernaut.
People saw that gold mine. I mean, I guess for ad dollars too, it was probably some of the cheapest advertising, right? Early on. I mean, you couldn't.
Well, it was cheap, but you got what you paid for. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it was untraceable clicks, meaning, as you know, and it gets more complex, worse, if you want to say that every year. But, you know, back in 2011 or whatever, Facebook wouldn't allow you to put a cookie on an ad and follow the activity of the person who saw the ad on Facebook to a transaction. Today, you know, or just a few years later, they had massive data warehouses, third-party data warehouses that, you know, that take credit card data, tax data, transactional data, demographic data, and they can pair it with your phone number or email address. And so advertisers can go in and go, I want to advertise to a person who has been on a car lot to price, you know, used cars in the last 14 days. I mean, they could get that granular.
That's what I think is so crazy, that you're able to drill down like that. That is amazing.
It's incredible. It really is. I mean, it's both scary and incredible. And as far as, you know, when I was at Yahoo in, call it 1999, 2000, or even later than that, they had targeting ads by gender was a giant innovation. And so prior to that, and it wasn't that long ago, How old are you, Jason? You're not that much younger than me.
I'm 52.
All right, I'm 55. So you remember the early days of email and the internet and all that. You'd see guys would see ads for Tampax, women would see ads for Viagra. That's just how it was called run of sight ads. There was no targeting. There was no geographic targeting. There was no age targeting. Forget about intent.
Right.
Forget about, third party metrics or markers that say this is a person who is interested in buying, fill in the blank, diapers, new cars, new house, mortgages, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, these innovations have been, the advertising has gotten much, much more efficient. And the publishers, Facebook and Google, have soaked up all the ad dollars. And that's why you see a lot of big traditional media companies laying off tons of people.
Yeah, and it's happening every day. Every day you read something new. There's some group of people is getting laid off.
But not podcasters like us. We're in for millions. We're getting, they're throwing money at us, man.
That's right. Oh, I can't. Yeah, there's a truck backed up in the front door, breaking it in. Do you think we'll ever see a company like that grow as fast and have that much success early on? Are those days?
Sure.
Yeah. Just depends on the idea, right?
Well, I think AI. I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but I think if you look at the rapid growth of AI and adaption by consumers, it's probably some kind of similar trajectory. It's one of these technologies that's been sort of a fantasy for years and years, and all of a sudden, 12, 18 months ago, it becomes a reality. And it's like, if you're not using ChatGPT or some of the other platforms, Perplexity, you're behind.
Yeah. In any business model, I think it's being incorporated into everything. So yeah,
totally.
Does it scare you at all? Does AI kind of worry you about how fast it's going?
I'm not overly concerned about it. I do think there's massive implications, and certainly just in the last month, some of the videos I've seen, some of the deep fake videos the quality is 5 times what it was a year ago.
Yeah, true.
And that has pretty serious implications for democracy and potential societal upheaval. But I think we'll adapt. I think we'll realize you'll start to doubt everything that you see and hear.
Yeah, we will. And I think there will become even more hunger for authenticity and what something being real is. I think we'll get that. I see it as being kind of oversaturated, and then people will finally come to a point where it's like, we want something real, and tangible that we can take to the bank, and not just something somebody's created and it wants to get a narrative across.
Yeah. But speaking of the stuff that scares me is, again, 55, I could lose my marbles any day now, but I probably will within the next 30 years, right? God willing, I stay alive that long.
I think I'm already there.
Yeah. The stuff you hear about seniors being taken advantage of by these absolutely despicable scammers I think that's real, and that's very, very scary to me.
Very scary, especially.
And it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse.
Oh yeah, that's going to get worse. Technology is only going to get better, and people, unfortunately, the scammers can grab onto that and do horrible things.
We're in Riverside right now, and Riverside is the platform that I use to record my podcast. They have a way to create an AI version of your voice that you can text a voice in your voice.
Yeah.
So you could have your articles read by your AI avatar, by your AI voice avatar, and people wouldn't know it's you. And so they could just as easily have you call your grandmother and say, I'm in prison, wire me $10,000 or whatever.
And, unfortunately, people will fall for that.
They will. Absolutely will.
Well, getting back to inside Facebook, what's your take on Mark? Was he a good boss? What was that like?
I was many layers below Mark. So I don't know about his management philosophy, but I think he's the real deal from a technology visionary. And I think, when I say that, what I mean is he knew what he was building long before the world bought that it was real, long before that. I remember one of the most fascinating things about working at Facebook was the Friday all hands meeting, where you would sit there and you would listen to Zuck and Chamath and some of the other leaders, Chris Cox, Shrep, some of the other senior technology people talk about the vision for the company. And you'd sit there and it would be mind blowing. The concept that I remember watching the Obama inauguration on Facebook, streaming on Facebook, with a commentary stream of people from all different parts of my life live next to it. And it was something I had never ever seen or envisioned or even thought about before. And it blew my mind.
Yeah.
That you could have this shared viewing experience across the world with people you knew or didn't know. And it was just, at the time, it was just mind blowing. And there was stuff like that every week, every month they'd come out with some new innovation. I remember they talked about Facebook Connect. I can't remember what it was, but when you could log into, sportsillustrated.com or whatever your other websites were with your Facebook credentials. I'm like, and then you could like articles with Facebook on other websites. I'm like, these guys are building the plumbing infrastructure below a pre-existing internet. It was mind blowing. And the stuff that he was talking about back then sounded like hocus pocus, but now it's like stuff that we take absolutely for granted.
Now I've noticed too, you can actually log in to certain apps with your Facebook account, so that ties you in. It's like I've seen that a lot more now too.
Yeah, it's everywhere. I mean, anyway, those were having a front seat or having a seat on the first row of innovation like that was like drinking from a fire hose, to use an overused term. But it was also challenging, and it was inspiring, and it was stimulating. And so that was a really neat part of working there. And I remember early on, Zuck was talking about, as an ad salesperson, we were incentivized to think quarterly, every 90 days. Hey, we've got to take budget from Yahoo. We've got to take budget from MySpace, because all the dollars were in this social media budget at the time. And our competitors were, MySpace and Yahoo from an advertising perspective. And Zuck would be like, why are you even worrying about MySpace? He's like, we're building an app to connect humankind. And it was like, really? Well, would you tell our advertisers that? So,
right.
So it was like his ambitions were so huge and long-term. And he said no to all these people, the CMOs and the heads of ad agencies. And they're just like, you're going to do things the way we want you to do it, because we're the ones with the dollars. And he basically gave them the finger and said, no, I'm building an app to connect humankind. And when we're ready, we'll do it the way we want to do it. And so he made a lot of people mad, because he disrupted the industry, and he said no to powerful people all along the way.
And he had a vision. So I guess it was like, I know where I'm going. You just got to wait. Yeah,
it's Jobsian in that way.
Mm-hmm.
The consumer doesn't know what they want. I know what they want.
Right.
Going back to the whole, if you ask, Henry Ford said, if you ask a consumer what they want, they'd say a faster horse. Well, we got enough horses.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. It's a different breed. I mean, I think it's to have, especially early on, like you mentioned, him not taking that money. I mean, you got to have some real discipline there to know that what you're creating is going to be even bigger than that. So
and the people that you're going to are who you take money from matters. I mean, he did take money from Peter Thiel, but he knew that if he took money from Yahoo would ruin the product, and that absolutely would have happened, because Yahoo would have tried to shoehorn Facebook into their ad model, as opposed to allowing it to develop on its own.
At that time in your life, did you put comedy on hold for a bit, or were you still kind of banging around in some of the clubs?
In between Yahoo, I'd gone out to California to do comedy in 2005, and I got engaged in 2007. And after we got engaged, I was like, I think I need a job. And so when I got that job, I stopped doing comedy for 6 years. I worked at the company for 4.5, but I just stopped doing comedy. At the end of my time at Facebook, they asked me to move up to headquarters, saying very nice things about my future there. But I was really kind of cooked, and I wanted to move back home to Atlanta, where I grew up. My parents were sick. I wanted to be a part of that. And, the Facebook stock that I gotten was worth a lot of money. And I was like, I think I'm going to go figure out what I want to do next. And so I went home. And only after another year or two after I left the company did I start doing stand-up again. Because I was back in Atlanta. I'd sort of failed once by, dropping out and going back to the corporate world. And I didn't know where to start in Atlanta. Yeah. And I was afraid of failure. But at a certain point, I was like, look, I've been given this amazing gift to have the freedom to do whatever I want to do. And to not go after that dream would be a dereliction of opportunity. So I'm going to just start going to open mics and start writing every day and see what happens.
Did you find yourself, were you really, I mean, the definition of happiness is long and varied, but were you happy during the corporate time, or did you always kind of see, well, when I get back to stand up, that's when I'm going to be really content?
I was doing what I had to do.
Yeah.
And I loved working at Yahoo. That was a great time. It was a different time of life. I was in a different role. But then I went and did stand-up comedy, and it was cool for a lot of reasons. But what I figured out over time is that no matter what you're doing, your 80% of life is going to be good and 20% of life is going to be annoying. And if you focus on what's annoying, you're never going to be happy. And so I would have loved to become immediately successful and famous in comedy and being paid a lot of money. But that's not how it works out for 99% of the people in the comedy industry. And so, yeah, there was a lot of things that were frustrating for me at Facebook. And then when I started doing what I wanted to do full time, comedy every day, there's plenty of stuff that's frustrating about being in comedy. And you have to look at it like, this isn't just I'm going to go try this for a year. It's like, I'm going to be a comedian. That's my life. And it's a 10 or 20 year, 30-year journey. And I'm committed to the journey, and I embrace the crappy parts of the journey.
Yeah.
I embrace the being ignored. I embrace the travel. I embrace the low pay. Because that's the part of the job that you're committing to. Like everybody thinks about if you put in a 2x2 graph on sort of the sexy and the well-paying, everybody wants to be famous and on Netflix and all that, but
right.
that's not what the job is. The job you're committing to is the process of trying to earn your way into that quadrant. And that's where you spend 90% of your time, even if you ever get there. So you better enjoy the struggle, because if you don't enjoy the struggle, you should be doing something else.
It's like people, when you get on the scene, people start recognizing you or knowing your name. It's like, oh, it's overnight success. I mean, I love that term, because it's like, 15 years of overnight success.
That's right.
But did you get a lot of fuel for your comedy from corporates, like in Facebook, or how things work? Is that, do you pull any stories from that time?
When I do corporate events, I'll maybe call back to that stuff. But really, I think about, in my comedy today, I think more about the societal implications of technology and how we use it.
Yeah. And
what that says about us. Like we say we care about our data, but I don't think we care about our data,
Yeah.
If I cared about my data, would I walk around with this iWatch on my wrist, this tracking device?
Right. Phones in your pocket.
You don't care about our data. We care about convenience. We care about efficiency. We care about, how technology makes our lives easier. But people that talk about how concerned they are about their data are overstating their concern.
Yeah, it's if we were, I mean, we're kind of all cooked, right? I mean, everything seems like it's tracking us, or we're not private, or as private as we think we are. I even wonder about the firewalls and VPNs that are advertised all over the place now. I mean, are there ways to even get through that?
I'm sure there are. I mean, I would imagine they offer you an additional layer of security, but somebody that wants to, it's some hacker who's employed by the state of Russia, or or is just an independent criminal in Estonia, China, or Las Vegas, is going to find a way. If they want to get into your accounts, they'll find it.
Oh yeah, eventually they're going to get there, right? I mean, it's going to happen. One podcast I was listening to of yours, I heard you talking about the Serenity Prayer. It was and interesting about the second verse of the Serenity Prayer, which I think probably a lot of people didn't realize. I didn't realize the second verse was there, but one passage that stood out to me was accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, I think is how it goes. But just thinking about comedy, and even working your way up through corporate and comedy, it just seems like that is, like you said, it's part of the process. So I think, like, taking your lumps, going through it, I think that's just part of getting better, right? It's way to, even if it's a struggle, you're at peace because you're doing what you love.
Yeah, the second verse of the Serenity Prayer, I'm going to go ahead and read it. Wait a minute, if I can find it. Accepting living one day at a time. And this is part of, I'm not in recovery. I was talking to a guy, Turney Duff, who's a good buddy of mine, who is a recovering cocaine addict and alcoholic. But this was pointed out to me by my speaking agent, actually, who knows this prayer from, she's an evangelical Christian. So she knows this prayer. I only thought it was God give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things that I can, and wisdom to know the difference. But she told me that there was a second verse, which goes, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as the pathway to peace, as you just said, taking as he did, that being Jesus, the sinful world as it is, not as it would have it, trusting that he will make things right if we surrender to his will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him in the next. Reasonably Happy is the new name of my podcast, Crazy Money, which I started 6 years ago. But no, I was only when my speaking agent pointed out to me that Reasonably Happy is in that second verse that I knew that there was a second verse at all. And I asked Turney about it because it's of its connection to the recovery community. To your point, accepting hardships as a path to peace. I think that there's a guy named Mark Manson who wrote a book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, which sold millions and millions of copies. And either in that one or the follow-up, he says something to the point of, don't follow your passion. Ask yourself what you're willing to suffer for. Mm. And I think that's a very informative way to think about what you're supposed to be doing with your life. Yeah. Because if you're willing to suffer for something, that means it's really, really important and a significant part of your identity or who you want to become. And imagine, if you will, that you have all the money you need, that you're married and you want to stay married, and that, you're not looking for anything else besides like picking a craft. Mm-hmm. Well, how would you spend your days? Mm. And when I was in that position as a newly retired Facebook and alumnus, I thought all the time I was at Facebook that I really thought I wanted to learn Spanish, and I still think I want to learn Spanish because I'd taken like 3 years of it in high school, and we travel a little bit, and I like going to different countries and being able to speak a little bit of Spanish and feel like I'm connecting with people and beyond what the average American can get away with, right?
Right.
And so when I quit Facebook, I started taking Spanish lessons not too long after that. And it's really cool when the vocabulary starts to come, and you're remembering all these words and you start to think even a little bit in Spanish. You see something and you think about the Spanish word for it. But then you start speaking, the past tense and the pluperfect and the future tense. And you realize, the reason I don't speak Spanish isn't because work was preventing me from speaking Spanish. It's because I don't want to put in the work to memorize all these different tenses. Mm. And so I go, I'm not willing to suffer for Spanish. Mm. That's not something I'm willing to put the work in on. And I guess it's not that important to me. And if it's not that important to you, if this dream you think you have isn't that important to suffer for, then it's not a dream. It's a fantasy.
Mm. That's profound, because I think that's right on. If you're not willing to suffer for it, or you still hear me? You got.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
My
no worries.
Just pluggy. Yeah, I mean, look, my wife, we have dogs, and I don't love cleaning up poop. And honestly, if I was single, I probably wouldn't have dogs. Mm-hmm. But if you're a dog owner, cleaning up poop is just part of the game. It's not even. You just do it because you love that thing. You love the dog. You see the whole cost benefit analysis. You don't think about it as picking up poop. It's table stakes to own a dog, but you love dogs, and the giving love and receiving love from that animal is way more important to you than what somebody else might consider the suffering of taking care of that dog and the sometimes unsavory parts of it. And so, if you're not willing to suffer from something, you can let it go. Yeah. Suffer for something, not from something. You can let it go and not plague yourself with the, gosh, I wish I could do that. Well, if you're not willing to suck at speaking a language or learning a craft like cooking or painting or comedy, if you're not willing to fail, if you're not willing to be broke, if you're not willing to have the world ignore you, even when you get to be pretty good at it, then you're in the wrong business. And you should keep that job as a bank loan officer or an accountant or a plumber or whatever it is that you're doing that pays the bills and is a little bit more predictable than pursuing some craft that feels like a dream to you.
Certainly safer to do that. I mean, some days, and I'm sure you're the same way, some days you may wake up and go, what am I doing? I mean, you feel like sometimes
all
you
the
don't
time.
get any traction.
All the time.
But I love it. I love, having a production company and trying to come up with new projects and sell projects and that kind of thing. So it's a constant war, but that's what I love. And I feel like, may be wrong, but I feel like that's kind of what I was made to do. So I think, like you said, I'm willing to put up with that struggle. So, very true.
Yeah. So I do think that's somewhat informative. Let's read it again, just to, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace. I think that's, if you're accepting that hardship, you can achieve some degree of peaceful resignation because you're like, I'm doing what I care about, and that's okay. It makes the hardship worthwhile. It's suffering for something you don't care about. That is suffering. Yeah.
No, that is. And it's like I was going to say, it's much better than the alternative. If it doesn't fulfill you, but it's easy, or if you come in every day, clock in, clock out.
That's right.
You're not really fulfilled,
and that's probably where most people find themselves at their work.
Yeah.
And it's like, God, I got to drive 45 minutes to and from work and, suburban Atlanta, and go to a job that I don't love, that doesn't feel terribly meaningful to me, with people that I'm not crazy about. But then again, why do you do it? You're suffering to raise your family.
Yeah.
You're suffering to pay the bills, to do something for a higher good.
Because it's a consistent paycheck, where what we do, it's not always the case.
No.
You feast or famine sometimes.
But this is why you better have grateful kids, because otherwise you want to smack them upside the head.
That is exactly right. I'm loving the book so far. I'm not all the way finished with it, but it's so great. I just love it.
Thanks, man.
And it's you just mentioned, I think, the quote, "Don't be afraid to suck," and that stood out to me because I think that we need to fall on our face sometimes in life, and even with in entertainment and art. I think that's only how you get better, and it just keeps you kind of honest. I mean, just makes you realize that there's some more to go,
Well, any new craft. And so the story goes, I was taking acting lessons in 2005 in Los Angeles, and I went to this Leslie Kahn's acting school, which is a well-known acting school in Los Angeles. And on the first day, they give you a T-shirt that says "Dare to Suck." And I'm like, well, that's not very encouraging. Why would you tell me that I need to suck? And the whole point is, no, you need to be comfortable not being good at something, because you're here to learn. You're here because you're not a great actor. And we are here to go through the suck and the growth together. And without sucking, there's no growth. Without bombing, you're not going to build new material in your comedy set. Without babbling like a kindergartner, you're not going to learn a new language. Without burning a souffle, you're never going to learn how to be a French pastry chef. It's just the path.
I think it's interesting to look back and people that you may admire, think are successful. When you look back at their story, and almost every single one of them failed 1,000 times and didn't succeed until something finally clicks. So I think it's just, you got to keep going, and never, you can rest, but never quit.
That's true. There's another story in the book about the 10,000 hour rule of success. It's called something like What Malcolm Gladwell Didn't Tell You. And this might even be the same story. But, you can put in the 10,000 hours and grow, but that doesn't mean the world's going to necessarily recognize you to the extent you believe you deserve to be recognized.
That's true.
And you might not even be as good as you thought you would be after 10,000 hours. So you have to do the thing that you want to grow at for the love of the thing, because that's your reward. Your trying is your trophy.
Yeah.
The reward is the doing of the thing, and the answer to the question, what would happen if I gave it my all? That's what you get.
Yeah.
And sometimes the answer is, I got better at the thing. I met fellow travelers who enjoy this thing.
Yeah.
I learned about myself, but it doesn't mean you're going to have your name in lights or $1 million on your paycheck.
And the gift to be able to get up every day and continue doing what we love, that's a huge gift.
I'm telling you, the biggest difference between working at a job you don't love and doing the thing that you do love is how you feel when you wake up in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at that phone and you don't dread what's on the other side of it.
Mm. I can only imagine with Facebook what kind of messages would be blowing up every day.
Well, and I mean, look, that's why, fortunately you made, if you get in a company that is that small and has to grow and has to build systems and has to hire people, and that's why you end up making good money, is because you got there early when things were really hard.
Yeah.
And you paid the price with a lot of late nights and a lot of weekends working and a lot of frustration as systems got built. And it doesn't mean it's easy to work there now.
Yeah.
But, a lot of fire drills that kept you up at night and made picking up that phone in the morning like, geez, what's gonna present itself today?
Mm-hmm. That fear that Sunday scaries feel probably every night.
Totally.
Every day.
Totally.
In the book, I've noticed, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I've seen you it really is kind of like a manual for life. I've noticed you go through different stages of what you thought wealth was, what being rich was, and happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Has that been a lifelong journey? Has that changed in different stages of your life, what you thought being wealthy and happy was supposed to look like?
100%. I mean, I grew up one of 6 kids, slightly upper middle class in the suburbs of Atlanta. We had everything we needed, but financial finiteness, the fact that there was a limited amount of resources for an unlimited amount of demands was very much a part of our life. And so my father and my mother were incredibly frugal people, wonderful people who were married for 55 years until my mother died, committed to educating their kids, committing to teaching their kids values and morals and all that stuff. Great, good parents, good people. But money was tight, and it was always the like financial stress was a subtext of how we grew up. And so my brilliant mind came up with the thought, well, I'm going to work hard, get into a good college, make good grades, get a good job, make more money, so I'll never have to worry about money. Well, that's a fallacy in and of itself, in the sense that I know a lot of people have a lot of money and they worry about money a lot.
Yeah.
Right. And so you think that money is, that wealth is a certain number. That, hey, if I have $1 million, I'm rich. And you get $1 million and you start go, I'd really like a lake house. I think I need $5 million. And then you get to $5 million and you go, you know what? I'd like a plane or something. I need 25 or 30 or $50 million. The more money you get, the more rich people you start hanging out with. And so, what you define as wealth is always beyond your reach. There's these 2 researchers, Mike Norton from Harvard and I'm blanking on her name, from University of British Columbia. And they wrote a book called Happy Money. And one of the studies they talk about is that they asked millionaires, there's no additional happiness after $75,000 in annual income. That study that was done by Angus Deaton at Princeton and Daniel Kahneman there. And I actually interviewed Professor Deaton on my podcast. But that has since, I think there's a lot of logic to it, which is once additional money doesn't take chaos out of your life, additional money just provides like nicer experiences. But like if your car won't start, or if you're afraid that you can't pay your rent every month, a little bit of additional money really changes your life. But once you get to a certain point, and it's probably not $75,000, maybe it's $150,000, depending upon where you live, and blah, blah, blah. But it's like at some point, there's declining marginal benefit from an additional dollar. Well, Norton and Dunn, her name was Dunn, actually said, well, we believe that millionaires don't fill out surveys. So they partnered with a bank and got, I think, 2,000 millionaires to fill out a survey. And they asked all of them, how happy are you on a scale of 1 to 10? And they said, okay, now what would it take, given that number, what would it take to get you to a 10? And all of them said twice what I have, money-wise.
Twice.
Okay?
Wow.
Twice. So people who have $500,000 think $1 million will make them happy. People who have $1 million think $2 million, et cetera, et cetera. I find that to be I find that to have mirrored my own experience.
Mm.
And it's only when we catch ourselves and make the conscious choice to decide that we have enough that we will be okay. And, there's things I've been blessed way more than I deserve, but you know what I really would like? I'd like a NetJets card. That would be super cool. But then, I got a NetJets card. I'm going to start going, I kind of like my own plane.
Yeah.
And you know what? I really want to, blah, blah. It never stops. It never, ever stops.
There's never enough, right?
And so, right, that's right. And so, and so I've made my family, my wife and I have made the choice that we're going to prioritize me doing the creative dream that I've had since the day I met her over trying to get to that next level of fancy travel or having that, other vacation house or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so, and we're enjoying the satisfaction of doing the things that we want to do with our time as opposed to trying to get those other things. I have no disrespect whatsoever for people who make different decisions than we've made.
Sure.
But everybody's an adult here and we're in charge of making our own decisions. And if you're going to make those decisions, whether it's to stay in a job, to get more money, to have other experience, so give yourself the credit of enjoying those things.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to do, is to say, I'm good. We have enough. We have a good life. We can live a good life, share a little bit with some other people. And I'm not going to stress about the things that I don't have. I'm going to give myself the credit for empowering my own ability to chase this dream.
It's kind of like editing your life down, right? Because if you kind of say, okay, yeah, those things will be nice, but those are not necessities. So you kind of start to really hone in on what is a want and what is a necessity.
Well, that's right. The problem with needs is that wants become needs.
Right.
I mean,
right. I need that. Yeah,
you need it. You have a Camry and you want a Mercedes, but once you get that Mercedes, your next car, you need a Porsche.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's about clarity of your priorities and your values to say, I choose, my vision is this. And by the way, you can lay out and say that this is what I think I would like to lead the most satisfying life I can lead. You're not going to be right about all those things. Right. It's okay for those things to change. Your basic values shouldn't change.
Right. But that should be your compass.
Yeah. I mean, you can tweak them. And certainly as, your family status changes and you age and, certain things that weren't priorities 20 years ago become really important, and you start thinking about, well, what do I want to contribute to the world? You start thinking in terms of grandkids instead of kids.
Right.
You start thinking in terms of legacy instead of experiences for right now. And that's okay for things to change. But I think somebody that has significantly more resources than I has told me that she believes money doesn't change who you are. It amplifies who you are. And I don't think she came up with that, but she's had the opportunity to experience it. And I think that resonates with me.
Interesting.
That if you're an altruistic person, more money gives you the opportunity to help a whole lot more people. If you are a more self-centered person, then money has the opportunity for you to magnify your personality and your wealth to the world.
If you really are self-centered and want to travel or have expensive cars, you're really going to have expensive cars.
Look, travel's not a bad thing.
No, it's not. Those things aren't bad. It's just a matter, I guess, like you said, though, it's what is important to you. Where are your priorities?
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to be able to travel more for sure.
No doubt.
Do you think some of that, especially for guys, do you think some of that runs into also keeping up with the Joneses? Like Billy over here's got a Tesla. I have to have a Tesla. Or do we really need to take stock in what our values are more these days than to really try to keep up with everybody else?
Well, I absolutely do. And for better or for worse, broadly speaking, men are judged and valued in society based on their accomplishments and their resources, and women are judged based on their attractiveness.
Yep.
I mean, you can argue with me, but I'm pretty secure in having that conversation with you. And there's a million evolutionary reasons why that is, and they make perfect sense. It doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's ideal. But the manifestation of that is that guys compete in different ways than women compete with each other.
Yep. No,
And
you're right.
And the old measuring contest among guys finds its form in in the money category, or in the resources category, or in the power category.
Mm-hmm.
We are tribal people, and they are hierarchical positions in tribes that we are evolutionarily designed to want to pursue. It just is what it is. And with the technology that we have today, speaking of amplification, social media is it is gasoline on the fire of our cravings.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And so, and of our comparison, our tendency to compare. And so, what's interesting about this is that all the things you compare yourself with your peers on are things that can be counted. Your
True.
money, your Instagram followers, how much, weight you lost or whatever. But they don't count, how healthy you are, how kind you are, how much your children love you, and vice versa.
Yeah.
We don't compete on those things because you can't count them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, well, is that a recipe for happiness? Probably not.
Right. Have you ever had the experience, like, I know, like, for guys, you go into an event, a social gathering or party, and first question is, what do you do? If you don't know the person, what do you do for a living?
Sure, yeah.
Or even, what do you pull down for? That's
I've never had that.
That's pretty bold.
But I mean, that's basically the dogs sniff each other's butts to gather data, and that's what they're doing.
Exactly. No,
they're processing data. They don't have punch cards from IBM to peruse, and so we, as tribal beings, I mean, you can look at it a couple of different ways. One is, yes, we want to find out where in the pecking order we sit relative to other people. That is a natural and okay thing. There's more artful ways to do it. There's better questions you can ask that can lead to more substantive conversations. But I think it's okay. Another way to look at it is to say, I'm trying to strike up a conversation with somebody and find commonalities, maybe people we know in common, or maybe things that we're both passionate about. I went to a dinner party the other night with some relatively well-known people, and my first question was, "How was your Thanksgiving?" First of all, I knew what they did. I knew who they were. They were celebrities. But you want to say something like, how was your Thanksgiving? Who were you with? I was with my family. I was like, oh, really? What'd you cook? Did you make anything special? Like, you can get into some like real conversation, as opposed to just sort of like, tell me about the expected thing that somebody's going to ask you, or, figure out who people are in the pecking order. And so if you can just think about something that's a little bit, maybe will lead you to some commonalities.
People love authenticity. I mean, they love for you to be real. I mean, we're all human, no matter what we do, no matter how much success. Everybody has those common things that happen in life. Thanksgiving is a great one. So, I mean, they probably love that. I mean, they probably get asked about the other stuff all the time, which is, that's kind of like goes to like writing a letter to someone instead of an email. It's like that will really stand out, doing something that's unexpected like that.
Yeah.
But, well, do you think, what's your advice? We've talked a lot about, trying to make it in corporate world, business, entrepreneurship, comedy, which is very competitive. What's your advice for someone who may be struggling or think, do I stay on the path? What's going to happen? How do you keep getting out of bed every morning? And as far as rejection, how do you handle that? I mean,
oh God, how am I going to get out of bed today? My life's pretty good. Yesterday I interviewed Ricky Smiley, he's a black comedian and national syndicated radio host. He is a huge celebrity. And he lost his son to an overdose a couple of years ago. And I read his memoir, his book he just wrote about the experience. And it's like, first of all, I want to just recognize that, like, getting out of bed is not a big deal for me, because I don't have to face the grief from losing a child or something like that. And there's a lot of people out there that are dealing with that kind of stuff all the time, that live in a parallel universe that a lot of us who are fortunate to not have to deal with it aren't even conscious of, or even conscious to think of. So getting out of bed is I mean, I'm privileged to be able to get up and be excited about where my life is most of the time,
Yeah.
almost every single day. So what gets me out of bed is that, I mean, I can't think of anything I'd rather do than it, talking to the people I get to talk to on my podcast, going to comedy clubs and making people laugh, and, you know, trying to wrestle with some of these issues that I took for granted for so long, until I really started to think about them through the podcast and my writing, and say, well, what do I really think about it? And writing is a great exercise of chewing something up and sort of reforming it and saying, and trying to make it interesting and funny at the same time. I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. You know, what I haven't figured out yet is how to create on Instagram. But sitting down and writing really feels authentic to me.
Yeah.
And it helps. It's therapeutic in a lot of ways, that I get. It comforts me to take an idea and twist it around and put it back together, and then share it and have people tell me that it made them think, or made them laugh, or gave them some perspective when they needed it.
I think there's a connection with that. And when you're on stage, you hear that instant response of applause or laughter.
Yeah.
It kind of, I think as artists, you know, it's kind of what we want. We want that feedback. And that's, it is, like you said before, it's a drug. It's very addictive.
Yeah. I mean, it is the need for affirmation might not be incredibly healthy psychologically.
Well, no, but I mean, it's what's behind what you mentioned though. I get your point. It's like, to know that you're changing someone's life or you're helping them, that's the best gratification you can get.
I think that what's cool about laughter is I'm going to name drop again. I interviewed Deepak Chopra on Monday, I guess. And John Cagg, who is a philosophy professor at UMass Lowell. And we were talking about when we're happiest. And John remarked that, he's happy when he's doing things with his kids, when he's engaged in an activity and he's not sitting there thinking about his life or about his career, when he's not ruminating on things. I think we're the happiest when we're not thinking about ourselves. Absolutely. And when you're laughing, you are in the moment. You are unconscious of anything other than that humor that you just experienced. And I think there's something gigantically authentic about that, and maybe that's what makes that micro moment of connection is what makes comedy sacred in a lot of ways.
Very well said. I totally agree. Paul, my friend, thank you so much for taking time for us. I can't thank you enough for being on. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Absolutely. Let's stay in touch for sure and come back when you can.
Anytime, man.
Happiness Sold Separately is created and hosted by Jason Hensley and is produced by Makash Films. Music by Soundstripe. Narration by Lauren Gobis. If you or someone you know is in crisis and needs immediate help, call the National Mental Health Hotline at 866-903-3787. We would be honored if you would rate, share, and subscribe. From the entire Happiness Sold Separately team, thank you for listening.